Dear friends of Love for Volleyball, Amor por el Voleibol, I'm honored and so happy today to speak with a person. I think one of the most important persons in volleyball, in history, and our future. So, with no longer introduction, I'm speaking today with Douglas Beal. With Doug Beal, how are you, Doug? It's an honor to meet you again.
Thank you. I'm doing well, Alfredo. It's very nice to speak with you also, and I appreciate the very kind introduction. Thank you.
Fantastic. I could speak more about your history, but I want to that you tell us about your history. And first of all, Douglas, please tell me, when did you start being involved in volleyball, and why did you choose volleyball as your sport and as your life?
Oh boy, we're going to go back many years. I was very fortunate that a physical education instructor came into my life when I was about 10 or 11 years old, introduced me to volleyball, and the sport became very attractive to me. I played or tried to play lots of different sports at a young age, but volleyball just was more appealing, and something about the sport really became increasingly attractive to me. Mm-hmm. And I started to play in my hometown. There was no junior age volleyball, so I was always playing with older people, adults. Okay. And I really think I was incredibly lucky that the people that sort of managed my world were wonderful and accepting and welcoming and good teachers and really wonderful human beings. And so quite a few of them became lifelong friends. And I just had this path that was not so normal in the United States back in the 1950s and 1960s. But for me, it worked out in a really positive way. And so, I don't know, I loved the sport almost from the very first time I started to play. And sometimes there's just this connection that is hard to define.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, I went on to play in the club world of U.S. volleyball, and got more and more interested, and gave up some other sports as I got older. And from college on, it was almost only volleyball.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember we spoke about this in Holyoke, about the different sports you have in the United States, and very important sports like basketball, ice hockey. I don't know, more media mass importance sports against volleyball, but volleyball is also very popular. And I wanted to ask you, how was your experience as a as a young player in college and high school? How was your evolution as a player? Did you feel comfortable? Do you played many championships? How was it in this first time when you was a young player?
I grew up in an area of the United States that was not rich in volleyball, but okay, it existed in the Midwest part of the United States. Partly because there were so many populations from mostly Eastern Europe,
okay,
from the old Soviet Union, but also Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Czech Republic, lots of different populations, and especially in the part of the country I grew up in. And so I was exposed to a wide range of different ideas about how to play the game, and different cultures. And again, I consider myself very fortunate to have seen those um, embedded parts of the sport, different ways to play the game, different ways to talk about the game from a pretty early age. And then I started traveling with clubs in the U.S. and my brother also played, although didn't continue as long as I did. And then I did go to university, and it happened to be one of the universities that had a serious men's volleyball team during those eras in the late 1960s.
Okay.
There weren't very many,
Mhm.
and I played for some championships, played at a pretty high level,
Mhm.
and continued to get better, and was fortunate that I had some really good coaches. And then I was able to earn a spot on the U.S. national team in 1970 for the World Championships that was held in Bulgaria in that year. And I played on the U.S. team that really wasn't terribly successful for 6 or 7 years. Um, it was a different era, and it wasn't very common to play for a long time. There wasn't very much money. There wasn't very much quality organization. I think volleyball was growing, but was not very professionally managed in the United States. You mentioned lots of other sports that were much more popular and represented in the media on television, and volleyball was not at that level in those years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was kind of my life until I started to have the opportunity to coach, and it again, many of us of my age started coaching more because somebody had to organize the opportunities to play. It
Yeah.
wasn't as much a career.
Mhm.
There were only a very few coaches who were thinking about it as a career, getting enough money to survive and earn a living. That has changed dramatically in the United States. I'm not sure that there is another sport that has grown as much as volleyball in the United States. It's really wonderful to see and remarkable, and looks like it's going to continue to go in a really positive direction.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's very interesting what you tell me. I did not know that you have this East Europe influence from volleyball because in the 60s and the 50s, volleyball were in these places. I think maybe the most important, besides athletics, sport and for the people over there. It was a group sport, so they search for making this more popular in their countries in the communist world. So it's very interesting because, as I told you before, this kind of volleyball and these times were very different schools of volleyball. You have the Japanese school, you have the Russian volleyball, the Soviet volleyball, the Czech volleyball, the Bulgarian. So you have many schools that were very different. And this time, correct me if I'm wrong, the Russian, the Bulgarian, the Czech, they were the best in these times. The Japanese were growing until they got the gold in Montreal and München in 72. And I think, and I can imagine you're with your teammates playing in this time and making big efforts to play against this already classics volleyball power length. So it's very interesting to mention. And the other thing about the growth and USA about volleyball, I remember in the 70s, or I'm not exact sure it was in the 70s or beginning of the 80s, that you have a semi-professional league, a mixed a professional league with women and men, and with the I think Walt Chamberlain, the ex basketball player, and promoted this league. But and also there were Brazilian players and Polish players from outside the country. But I don't know if this league helped the promotion of volleyball, or it was one shot of an maybe a great idea from some famous basketball player.
This was called the International Volleyball Association, IVA.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. Wilt Chamberlain and some other well-known personalities were either investing in this league or connected to television or playing. And it survived in a very unique format with 2 women and 4 men on the court. So it was completely different than anything else in any sport.
Yes.
Not just volleyball. But it actually survived for, I think, 4, 5, maybe even 6 seasons. Some cities were very popular with teams, and other cities not so much, and they changed. They had some really influential people who were investing in this, and yeah, I think it actually helped to bump up the popularity of volleyball and certainly the exposure. Even though there was a long time after it ended before another professional league, maybe even till today, when we have a really serious women's league starting in about 10 days, I think, or 2 weeks. That really seems to be having the possibility to be very successful. You know, certainly women's sports in the United States has grown probably more dramatically than any place in the world. We have a federal law that is particularly connected to our university system that has been remarkable for the growth of women's sports across many sports, but especially for volleyball, I think.
Absolutely.
And so we have a league, I think it's called the PVL, Professional Volleyball League, Pro Volleyball League, that is starting near the end of January, and I think has a wonderful chance to be successful. We have another league that is waiting one more year to begin at the end of this year and early 25, that I think also has some good possibility to be successful. So, yeah, the interesting part to me, Alfredo, is that there is a lot of interest, a lot of money to be invested, a lot of very experienced people who are suddenly, I guess surprisingly sometimes, interested in volleyball and how to promote this sport and build it and make it into a serious professional opportunity in the United States.
Fantastic. I have always admired your creativity. You invented volleyball, and you're continuously inventing new things to grow volleyball. It's amazing and fantastic, and I understand what you're saying. And getting a little back in your time when you were a player, when did you start thinking about to being a coach, to make a decision of your future as a person, as a professor, as a coach? When did you think starting about this, and why did you choose this? Because not so many volleyball players did choose to be a coach, because it's not absolutely not easy.
Yeah. As I said, a little bit it chose me, and a little bit I chose it, I think. There were, I guess, a lot of people of my era who, if we really wanted to become more professional, more structured, we had to take on some responsibility of organizing the clubs, organizing the competition, becoming involved with USA Volleyball, which was called something else back in that era, United States Volleyball Association. And so I think pressure. Volleyball to have more support for the national team, because at that time,
Excuse me,
our
Doug.
national,
Excuse
yeah,
me. There was a connection failure about a minute ago. You went.
okay,
Stop. Yeah, stop talking.
okay,
Please, can you take when you're
uh,
starting to be a coach, and please.
yeah. As I said, I think coach. I looked to begin coaching myself, so I was searching for that um, avenue to become more involved in the sport. But I think also the sport needed people of my age at that time, and so it certainly wasn't just me. Many, not so many, but a number of people became serious about coaching. Some at the university, some with the national team program, and I think we were trying to push USA Volleyball and the sport broadly to become more organized, more popular, more structured, because we all loved the sport and we saw a future that we needed to play a big role.
Yes.
And of course, at that time, there wasn't very much money in the sport. So being a full-time coach was very challenging to earn a living. And so there just were very few opportunities. But some of the very famous, successful coaches in our country started in the mid 1960s or up to maybe the mid 1970s. Al Skates, Jim Coleman, Carl McGowan, Marv Dunphy. There were a group of really influential people who committed their professional life, maybe their whole life, to coaching in some area that they lived and were working in. And so, I think that had a big influence on the sport. I was playing until I was about late 20s, and it was not so easy to continue to play on our national team because the national team was only really organized in the summer months.
Okay.
And each year it was sort of reinvented. The coach was not given the opportunity to know that he or she was the coach only for 1 year. And then the next year you had to be selected again. And the same with most of the players. Of course, now that's completely different.
Yes.
And obviously much better and much more successful. And so I think there were 6, 8, 10 people who had quite a lot of very positive influence on the evolution of the sport, which included, as you asked earlier, the evolution of the coaching profession.
Okay.
A number of people, Terry Liskevich and Mick Haley, who were two former women's national team coaches, started a national coaching organization.
Okay.
And that also had significant influence in growing the profession of coaching. And today, that organization, called the American Volleyball Coaches Association, has thousands of coaches, I think, registered at all levels, from the national team to the very youth level coaches, maybe 5, 6, 7,000 members, an annual convention, and has been enormously instrumental in growing the profession of coaching. And so now in the United States, we have a really robust profession. Even when I coached our national team in the late 1970s and the early 1980s, it was really not possible to think of coaching as a long-term profession. There just weren't very many opportunities to have security, a good income, and to really work at that. Very few schools, universities, almost no club, junior club existed at that time. High school didn't pay very much, if anything. So it evolved, it grew, and in some sense, it grew quite quickly. For those people living it, probably didn't grow fast enough. But that's a little bit about the history of the sport, and now for many of us, certainly of my age, the profession is remarkable and attracts really wonderful people, but people who devote themselves to coaching. And I think we have some of the most wonderful coaches and the coaching in the world, and I think the coaching profession is probably more. I don't know what the right word is. Maybe more advanced, maybe more robust in the United States than any place in the world.
Yes. It shows. It shows. And I want to ask you about this mythical history of the national team. Your coach, and we in Chile, for example, we saw this final of Los Angeles, and we didn't know who were these guys, and from which world they came from. They used short t-shirt sleeves. They used another kind of volleyball shoes. We didn't know. We knew the volleyball from Brazil, from Argentina, from Russia, Japan, but United States, we only saw in the beginning of the 80s some games via ESPN of the some college volleyball, female college volleyball, and we didn't know where are these people, but we saw this team winning the gold in Los Angeles, and obviously we know that before this there were a long-term project that you directed, and I wanted to ask you about this project. How was it, this project? Because as I said before, there were other countries, very important countries that dominate volleyball, like the Russian, like the Bulgarian, Brazil were growing, Italy, Japan also. How was it possible that you have this project, this national team project, and you grow in such kind of quality that you're obtain gold in Los Angeles and later in the World Cup and the national and World Championship? How was it possible? And please tell me how do you live this time?
A big question.
Sorry, but it's in my head.
Yeah, no, I understand. First of all, for some years before this, even 1968, for example, maybe even 1970, 72, there were really some very good players in the United States, really world class, I think. But the opportunity for them to play was very limited. The U.S. Volleyball Association had very little money. The structure of the national team was very year by year, very random. And so in the mid to late 1970s, there was a group inside USA Volleyball who were willing to talk about a changing environment for the national teams. We have good players. We don't give them enough money. We don't give them enough opportunity to play outside the United States. They play one competition every year, maybe 6 or 8 international matches, and then finished. And everybody understood, the players, the coaches, even the administrator, everybody understood this was never going to be successful. We couldn't compete on a regular basis with the best teams in the world at the Olympic Games or the Pan American Games or World Championships unless we change this structure completely. So I give a lot of credit to USA Volleyball, United States Volleyball Association, the leaders at that time. They were willing to first talk about a significant change, and second, they were willing to pay for what had to invest in this change. You had to subsidize the players more. You had to hire coaches full time. You had to pay for a lot more travel so that you could have many more matches. So first, this started with our women's team,
Okay.
and they organized a year-round training center. The first location was in Texas,
Okay.
in a small city outside of Houston, Texas, called Pasadena, Texas. And then about 2 years later, maybe 2.5, we did the same thing for the men. We went to a city in Ohio, not such a great place for volleyball, but the city was interested to support the men's national team on a year-round basis, with some money and some opportunity for jobs for the player, a facility, put a little money into the coach. And I was interested. I was maybe, I don't know, sometimes I think back and maybe I shouldn't have stopped playing, or I wish I had played longer, but I was available to coach. I loved the sport. And I had coached a little bit in the university, not so much.
Okay.
And I had also coached 1 year, or really not even a year, maybe 2 months with our junior national team. But somehow I was hired to coach the team. I'm really not sure how, because today would never happen. Absolutely. With so little experience, really. And some of the players were the same age as me. I played with them. So we went to this community, Dayton, Ohio, not so far from where I was living. I was at Ohio State in Columbus, so maybe 100 miles away. And we started to ask the players, you have to come here, but year round, not just for 1 month, or you have to be here year round. Some were eager to do it, and some were not so eager to do it. And so for a couple of years, we learned a lot about what it takes to train every day, to compete much more often, to have the money to travel to competition. So now, instead of 8 or 10 matches, now each year we're playing 50 or 60 matches. And after the 1980 Olympic Games, which of course the United States boycotted, a really terrible decision, because our women were quite good. The men, we still were not so good.
Yes.
Yeah. We moved to San Diego.
Okay.
The women moved to a place close to San Diego, the men directly to San Diego. And partly because so many of the players at that time were coming from that California universities, and so it was much easier. Plus, we had much more support, financial support. And so, again, I was hired to coach. And we had a really special group of players who were coming from only maybe 4 universities. The USA basketball team might come from 25 universities or 30. We only were coming from 4, but really special players. Karch Kurai was playing, Dusty Dvorak was playing, Steve Timmons, Craig Buck, Pat Powers, really remarkable players who were willing to be in a training center at that time, partly because the training center was very close to where they lived and where they went to school. And so we took the lessons we learned from the first effort, which was not so successful, and applied them in San Diego. And we put in a lot of training time and a lot of travel. I think 1 year we played almost 100 international matches. So in some ways, I think we had a great advantage over the rest of the world because we really could develop a very special team. We had more training, more matches than anybody else because in Italy and Russia and all the Eastern European countries, they were still playing in their club professional world.
Yes.
So their national team certainly was professional and very good, but they weren't playing as many matches as we were. And um, we traveled everywhere. And leading up to the 1984 Olympic Games, obviously being hosted in the United States, we were qualified. So we had a lot of opportunity to be good. We had some advantages, I think, that were special for that team at that time. But we traveled to Russia, the Soviet Union at the time, interestingly, frequently traveling to the Ukraine, which, of course, at that time was part of the Soviet Union. But the tragedy going on now, we've visited all those cities, Kharkov, Kiev, Odessa, and played because a lot of the most talented players for the Soviet Union were Ukrainian players at that time.
Exactly.
So,
sorry. Keep talking, please. No,
yeah.
Keep talking, please, Doug.
Yeah. The team just got better and better, and we played lots of matches. I think leading up to the 1984 Olympic Games, we beat Russia 4 times in Russia. We played tournaments in Czech Republic. We played in Poland, Bulgaria. I think we won 25 or 30 matches in a row before the Olympic Games. The first match we lost, maybe in 5 or 6 months, was the match to Brazil in the round robin part of the Los Angeles Olympic Games. The team that we eventually beat in the gold medal match.
Absolutely. And I talked with some Chilean players who played the World Championship in '82 in Argentina, and they they were sadly in a group with United States, with Bulgaria and Soviet Union. So they poor that have nothing to do. But they remember to play against the Russian, the Bulgarian, and they make some good games. But they told me that against the United States, they couldn't make anything, that the American team was so tough, so strong, so tall, that it was impossible for them to make nothing. And I also have the opportunity to speak with Coach Kirley some years ago, and he told me about this process that you're telling me. And also, they were very sad that they couldn't get more higher in this World Championship in '82. But I know today there were some political things between Bulgaria and Russia, and they wanted to take down the Americans. It's old story, but it was very interesting to know about the evolution of your team. And I wanted to ask you, because it's amazing, it's incredible to have seen the evolution of this team. All it's one part the coaching team, one part of the fantastic players, and also I think it's my opinion and about the style of your game, because as I told you in the beginning of our conversation, we saw a team with 2 main receptors, with 2 fantastic middle blockers, with this crazy outside hitter, and we didn't know where came from and this style of playing, because we have seen the Russian team, we have the Japanese team, Brazilian were growing, were improving. But how was it possible, or how, or where did invent the system of playing that revolutionized volleyball forever? I think, and many people as me think, there were a volleyball before Los Angeles and after Los Angeles. How was it possible, or when did you start thinking about this new system of playing?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate your comments about the team from Chile. I remember that match not quite so well as maybe the players remember. We played at the World Championships, and we had much higher expectations
Expectations.
in the top 8, 6, something like that. We thought we were growing. So we played with Russia, pretty aggressive, pretty strong, but they were better than us.
Yes.
And in that competition, nobody really challenged the Soviet Union team.
They were unbeatable, yes.
They were very good at that time and better than us, but we were growing. We played Bulgaria, and we were leading in the 5th set, 12-5, and we lost. And this match really provided us with the opportunity to say, we have to change how we're playing the volleyball. And the starting point was, we don't need 4 players for reception. We need fewer players. And this led to a big change, because it also changed the offensive system and where players were attacking. And then also we changed some blocking ideas, and we incorporated a lot of the back row attack, second line hitting. So after the World Championships of 1982, we became a different team. We didn't get so good at all these things immediately, but over the next year, we got really good. And I think part of it was, you have to look at the teams at the top of the world if you want to be competitive with them, if you want to play with them. How can we use the skills, the personality, the abilities of our players, and how can we be better than whoever the team is, the Polish team, the Soviet team, the Bulgarian team. The Cuban team was very good at that time, also very good. And frankly, we played the Cuban team a lot, because you have to, I don't know, you have to get into that mix.
Yes.
If you're going to play with the best, you have to play them a lot.
Yes.
And we went to Cuba every year.
There's some game against the Cuban in YouTube. You're playing, I think, in a college in the United States. It's a fantastic game.
Yeah. We invited them to the United States. We went to Cuba. We really developed, I think, a special relationship with the Cuban Volleyball Federation that honestly, I think, has existed until today. But also with the Soviet Union, we became really close with the coaches. We studied with them. Same with the Poland team. The same with some of the others. I don't know. It's an interesting fraternity, and so we changed how we were going to play, and it was not so easy sometimes to convince the players that this is a better way for us to achieve a higher level. And it put some different players on the floor, a different role, different responsibility for some of the players. But as we got better, it of course became much easier. So I think I give a lot of credit to the coaches who worked with me, Bill Neville particularly, and Tony Crabb. Those two were exceptionally creative thinkers, more than me, I think. I'm more conservative, more traditional, but I was smart enough to listen. And we also had some players that were really special and talented, and we looked at what they could do. And again, I think we weren't so fixed with our ideas about, you have to play the game in a certain way.
Yes.
Earlier in our discussion, you mentioned that in the 1960s and 70s, the world of volleyball, particularly the men's world, I think, was really different, very varied in the way different teams played. Japan played much different than the Soviet Union, much different than Poland, much different than Korea, much different than Cuba. And for me, that's really interesting. And one of the attractive things at the time, I think a little bit that's gone away in the world of international volleyball, but even in the top level of women's collegiate or men's collegiate in the United States. The teams play in a very similar style, which is kind of unfortunate in a sense, because a sport really is interesting when two teams are playing with different styles and you get to see how that matches up. Anyway, yeah, so we played a very different style also. Yes. We took a little bit from the Soviet team. We took a little bit from the Japanese, but we created, I think, an American style, a U.S. style, with the individual abilities of some players and some team systems. And I think for some years it influenced the sport in a very positive direction. There was some really creative thinking by coaches that maybe hadn't been so obvious before that U.S. team that won in Los Angeles and went on, to win the World Cup in '85, the World Championships in '86, the Pan American Games in '87, the Olympic Games in '88. So yeah, a pretty impressive run, I think, for a country that had no long-term quality history of the sport. Yeah.
But in this time, we all wanted to play like Americans, as you say.
Yeah.
The more American way of playing volleyball, not only the way of playing, but also as role model or fashion model. Because as I told you, many players from Chile or of South America, they didn't want to use knee pads anymore, like Kurt Kirley, for example, or they cut the t-shirt sleeves. Things like this are maybe examples of the influence of American volleyball. Not only the way of the play, but also in things like brands or the way of dressing. Maybe it's interesting to see. Me, it's interesting. I don't know for more people, but I wanted to ask you, Doug, after this time of coaching the American team, you went to coach to Italy. You make also you work in college again. How was it for you after being the national trainer, the national coach, to your last times in between these times when you decided to okay, I don't want to quit my active career as a coach, doing other things. How was this time for you?
Even after we win the gold medal in Los Angeles in '84, it was still very unusual to think of coaching the national team for a long time. It still wasn't financially fantastic. The opportunity to really have a life with a family and coaching was still evolving in the United States. And so for me, this was the right time to leave the team. I think also after you coach for 7 or 8 years with a lot of the same players, sometimes they need a different voice. And Marv Dunphy did a fantastic job of making the team even better. And for another 5 years, this team really was at the top of the world. There's always some ebb and flow, I think, of the quality of the players and the partnership between the leadership and the players and the support from the federation. It's really been great in the U.S. and it's continued to go up and up. And right now, I think we have a really special situation with Karch coaching our USA women, John Speraw coaching the USA men, and both of them for quite a long time. But you also have longtime coaches in Brazil and some other places around the world. And so it's a little bit of a different world right now. The professionalism of coaching has, as I've talked about several times already on this interview, really gone up, and that's really fantastic. For me, that's fantastic to see, because I think if a sport is going to be successful, grow, be popular, the different categories of the constituent groups have to really be professional. Certainly the players have to be compensated and want to play for a long time. And when I was playing on the national team, it was unusual for somebody to play more than 3 or 4 years. Now players are playing for 3 Olympics, 4 Olympics, 12, 15, 18 years. They can take a break from the national team and just earn a wonderful living by playing professionally in many places in the world. So the players are really professional now. The coaches are much more professional and many, many more opportunities for a long-term career. The referees and the judges, I think the same thing. We need really good people in all the phases of the sport. The organizers of competition, you have to have almost a professional fan base who really want to know about the teams and the individuals. And so marketing and social media and the promotion at matches and how television covers the games all have grown just in a spectacular way. This sport is so, of course, everybody's going to say the same thing about their own sport, but so unique and so special. I think, especially in today's world, where some of the social, cultural issues that are very common around the world don't seem to influence volleyball as much. So we don't have so many injuries. We don't have so much physical confrontation. We don't have so much drug issues or performance enhancing drugs. We don't have so much betting and match manipulation. We have some really nice characteristics of the sport that I think appeal to people in many parts of the world. I don't think there's a better sport that can really be the family sport like volleyball can be, and we modify the game to take advantage of its being really attractive for women as well as men. So it's just got a lot of components that make it unique and interesting, and I think we're seeing this incredible growth. Of course, I know about it in the United States more, but I think everywhere in Europe and Asia, and I think the next place we're going to see fantastic growth also in Africa, and lots more competition between professional leagues. I think that's one of the interesting parts to me that exists in soccer, in football, and maybe we need more of that in volleyball. So
yes,
it's a great time for the sport.
I think I agree with you. I think we're living in a great time for sports, and I wanted to ask you now about the Hall of Fame. I have last year the incredible opportunity to visit and attend the ceremony of the class of 2023. For me, it was one of my peak in my life. And I could meet you there. We talk hours with Silvano Prandi about volleyball with the Japanese people. It was amazing, a fantastic experience for me. And I wanted to ask you, when did you start being part of the Hall of Fame? And what do you think about this? And what do you think is the importance? For me, it's absolutely important, very important. But what's your opinion about what the Hall of Fame is doing and about its future.
So I was talking a few minutes ago about all the pieces of the sport. One of the most important pieces, I think, is how the sport recognizes the important people historically that have developed the sport and were the great players or the great leaders, the great coaches, the great officials. And certainly in the United States, this is a very well understood portion of making a sport popular. You have to honor the iconic performers. We have to recognize the history of the sport. And that always draws more people into the sport because it gives you some historical perspective of, oh, there was a great player who had so many kills, or a team that won so many competitions. Anyway, so the sport, of course, was invented in the United States in Holyoke, 1895. This is a small city in the western part of a small state, Massachusetts. And they, on their own, people in this community, started the hall to help promote their city, I think, back in the 1970s, maybe early. But they didn't begin to create an induction to recognize individuals until I think in the maybe mid 1980s. They started a little tournament. There was teams from Canada that would come, and the person who was one of my coaches and the coach of the United States men's team at the Mexico City Olympics in 1968, Jim Coleman, who has sadly passed away, but coached me, lots of other people. He believed the same things I just described. In fact, he taught them to me, really. And he was really influential in creating a serious Hall of Fame that would formally recognize the most accomplished people of our sport on an annual basis. And so, to be honest, for a couple of years, it was really only about U.S. people.
Yes.
But very, very quickly, we understood this cannot be the situation. This is a world sport, one of the three phenomenal sports in the world, the most popular sports, along with football, soccer, and basketball. So the United States, for many years, had a very small role. I think it's grown, but now. So I became involved maybe in the mid to late 1980s with Jim. I think part of my connection to this is my respect and admiration for Jim and his driving force.
Okay.
He also invented some really statistical system that we still use today. He invented the antennas that we still use today. Really, a really special mind for the sport on a world basis, and I think the hall is something that really our international federation ought to partner and support, so that we can grow the personalities, we can grow the events, we can inform the millions of people who love volleyball about the history, so that they understand how fantastic the players are today in the context of the growth of the sport. And I hope that will happen. I'm delighted that you are so connected now. I think anyone who goes to the Hall of Fame, who sees the emotion of the people who are honored, just believes in the mission of the hall and the importance of its role in growing the sport. So for me, it's easy. I have time. I have a passion for it. And I want to see the hall become something bigger than it is right now, and for people all over the world to understand it, and to recognize the wonderful history of our sport that is well over 100 years now, and
I have
I
the
think we have, yeah,
opportunity to invite Bernard Reichman during the Pan American Games here in Chile to my house to dinner.
uh,
And he was so happy when I told him I was in Holyoke, and he told me I was the first the international player inducted of the Hall of Fame. He
yeah,
remembered anything, everything, the Holyoke and the diploma. He was so happy, and
yeah,
that I think it's one of the many attractive things of the Hall of Fame, not only to celebrate the class of each year, and also celebrate and honor our past, because as I always say, with our past we can build our future. In volleyball, it's so important,
yeah,
especially we talk about this in United States about the concept of Hall of Fames, because I think in the United States is the Hall of Fame concept is very known, but not so much outside the United States. So um, like what I am doing and many other people are doing humbly is to help to spread Hall of Fame importance, what
yeah,
you're doing over there, because I think it's so important that for example the actual players, the young players, know that before them there were so many volleyball, so many decades of volleyball, and sometimes
yeah,
I speak with them and they can't even believe that a player, for example, played 5 or 3 or 4 Olympic Games. How is it possible? It's possible,
yeah,
but we didn't have the social media and the technology to communicate this. So I think it's so important, especially today. We are talking via technology, and
yeah,
so it's so amazing. It's
yeah.
more easy for us
Yeah.
today. So I agree with you on everything to tell, you're telling.
Thank you.
I remember our conversation in the United States with Sylvan or with the other people, fantastic people, and for me, it's so amazing to be part of this and to be able to make a humble contribution, because I think our history, all the players and coaches I have interviewed, is I think it helps the future generation of volleyball, and I think it's so important. So, Doug, I wanted I could speak 3 more hours about volleyball,
Yeah,
and hopefully we
we
can
could.
do it again in person. And but I wanted to thank you again for your time, to be so kind, for me to have been invited to the Hall of Fame, be part of the communications group, the advisory group, and to be in touch, because as I told our fans, our followers at the beginning of our interview, for me you are one of the most important person in volleyball, and for me it's a so big honor to be able to talk with you and make this interview. I hope for today and for our future.
Yeah.
Okay? So I send you
Yeah.
many good wishes, a successful
Thank you.
2024, and for you, for your family, and
Uh,
also for American volleyball that is growing so big and great, and I think it's gonna be unstoppable. So many wishes from Chile, and we keep in touch.
Thank you, Alfredo. It's my pleasure, and I wish all of your listeners and you and your family a really healthy, happy 2024. It's going to be a great year with the Paris Olympics for volleyball and, of course, the world. So, thank you very much. My pleasure.